everyone. I am here to kick things off this morning. Welcome to Vibrant Emotional Health's 2022 Disaster Mental Health Symposium, Bridging the Gap, a symposium on behavioral health care access for all, organized by Vibrant's Crisis Emotional Care Team. My name is Kim Williams, and I am Vibrant's President and CEO, and it is my honor to join you all this morning and welcome you all. We are grateful that you all are joining us for the next 2 days as we discuss actionable ways behavioral health care workers can promote equity and diversity within their work in disaster response and beyond. Over Vibrant's history of more than 50 years as a mental health organization, we have worked to ensure that everyone has access to care. All of us, as providers, recognize the benefits of mental health supports. Yet for so many, particularly those from historically and intentionally marginalized communities, finding and accessing the necessary culturally sensitive supports is complicated and frankly, most often impossible. Since the murder of George Floyd, we have begun a journey to break down the systemic racism within our own organization, while also advocating for societal and structural changes to ensure everyone, particularly Black and Brown communities, have access to needed mental health resources and supports. The pandemic has exacerbated long existing inequities. Over the past 2 years, over 1 million people died in the United States, a staggering number, with communities of color and economically disadvantaged profoundly impacted. More people have lost jobs, closed businesses, lost loved ones and care providers. It is estimated that 1 in 5 adults who survived COVID-19 are now suffering from long COVID, a condition that is disabling for many, putting further stress on our already strained service system for people with disabilities. In the last few weeks, we have witnessed a horrific racist murder, Buffalo, New York, which killed 10 Black elders in a grocery store, and an attack on a school in a largely Latinx community in Uvalde, Texas, which killed 19 children and 2 adults. The Uvalde community was further harmed by the presence of ICE agents at the school and a community filled with many immigrants and first-generation Americans. As an organization delivering mental health crisis support through programs like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, NYC Well, and the Disaster Distress Helpline, it is vital that we and the providers we work with understand the impact such incomprehensible tragedies have on our communities already facing a long history of intentional racism, discrimination, and stigma. It is important for us to stand as allies, friends, fellow humans for those in need when they reach out for support, when, where, and how they need it. We are dedicated to increasing equitable access to care for all. And we achieve this through a variety of methods. Thanks to our generous funders, partners, and particularly our teams doing the work, we have been able to launch programs on the national level, as well as on the local level in New York City. Through our partnership with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, over the years, we have expanded the capacity of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which provides round-the-clock support to anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. Last year, we were able to offer life-changing and life-saving support to over 3.6 million people through that service. We are grateful that SAMHSA chose Vibrant to continue administering the Lifeline as the new 3-digit dialing code becomes a reality on July 16th, when anyone experiencing a mental health emergency or suicidal crisis will be able to dial 988 to get free, confidential support 24/7. This new, simple, and easy way to connect to the Lifeline improves access for anyone needing behavioral health assistance. Thanks to the incredible work being done at the Disaster Distress Helpline, also known as DDH, Deaf and hard of hearing people are able to connect with trained crisis counselors who speak American Sign Language through a video phone service. The deaf and hard of hearing community has historically been unable to access these services because these resources are primarily hearing-based. Due to technological advancements and the DDH, people who are deaf or hard of hearing can also access crisis care in their own language. Our community programs in New York City further provide accessible and equitable care for people from historically underserved communities. Through these community-based programs, we work with adults, parents and caregivers, and youth and young adults to help them build the skills they need to live healthy and fulfilled lives. Our crisis emotional care team, the incredible leaders and healers who brought us together today, provide a compassionate presence while delivering crisis intervention and emotional care to empower survivors to navigate and process the distress of a disaster. The CECT also offers training to local providers to build their capacity to carry services through the longer-term recovery process. Just a few weeks ago, our crisis emotional care team put on a virtual training for behavioral health providers on best practices when responding to incidents of mass violence. Organized in response to the mass murders in Buffalo and Uvalde, our program provided information on how mass violence incidents can affect people's mental health and sense of safety, along with ways to best engage and provide support to people after a mass shooting. All of our free training programs help providers understand how they can support their own communities in times of crisis. The CECT manages a cadre of over 700 behavioral health professional volunteers who respond after a disaster or crisis. Over the last year, CECT volunteers provided behavioral health support to families in the Bronx, New York, following an apartment fire, to the tens of thousands of Afghan guests who've been invited into the United States, and conducted trainings on responding to incidents of mass violence, the invasion of Ukraine, and psychological first aid. This symposium is another facet of our commitment to crisis care. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from an incredible lineup of pioneering individuals in the behavioral healthcare field, discussing disparities and accessing behavioral health care after disasters and crises. You'll leave with tangible, actionable solutions to create change. Our sessions range from our first keynote speaker's address on using technology to better serve communities of color, to providing care for children and adolescents who have lost loved ones from disasters, to discussions from some of CECT's very own volunteers who deployed to provide support to people from Afghanistan now living in the United States. We'll also learn the ways organizations and communities can create inclusive and diverse systems to support the LGBTQIA+ community and people with disabilities. We will all learn about resiliency in the face of adversity and how we can support ourselves, our communities, and our neighbors in times of crisis. Disaster incidents are on the rise across the world, both natural and human-made, and many of the institutional systems currently in place are at their breaking point. The panels and presentations will provide some ideas, methods, and best practices for behavioral health care providers to best serve the communities most harmed by the breakdown of these systems. We are so appreciative of you taking time away from your day-to-day to join us here. To offer you a bit of interaction with colleagues, we invite you all to join us at breaks today and tomorrow from 1 to 2, and for happy hour tomorrow from 4 to 5 in GatherTown. Thanks to a generous sponsorship from GatherTown, we have a fun virtual space to come together, chat, and play some guided ice-breaking games, and just generally relax and take a breath. As care workers, it's important for us to also care for ourselves and each other. I urge you all to find comfort through each other and your own support networks. Be gentle with yourselves and with your colleagues. Use this time to connect with others and share some of each other's burdens rather than holding it all alone. I'd also like to acknowledge some of our co-sponsors and partnering organizations for this year's symposium. Thank you to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, which continues to provide generous and much needed funding in support of the Crisis Emotional Care Team. Tomorrow, during the keynote address, we will hear from the CDP's Disaster of Domestic Funds, Sally Ray, about the importance of funding to support long-term recovery operations and trauma-informed care for survivors. Thank you to Decision Point Health and the Group for Advancement of Psychiatry. Both organizations have helped support, fund, and guide our development of a new way of thinking about and reacting to disasters. As you will hear in panel 6 tomorrow, the CECT and several of our committee members have been working to create a new model that accounts for the chronic, cyclical nature of disasters today. Those who attended last year's symposium may remember learning and giving feedback about this new chronic cyclical disaster model. We are pleased to be able to present the final version we created with help from your feedback. Thank you to SAMHSA, with which we've been proud to partner over the years. Through their funding, the Crisis Emotional Care Team sent volunteers all across the United States to support people from Afghanistan who came to our country last September. Their partnership and guidance have proven invaluable to our work, and we look forward to continuing our work together. We would also like to thank all the presenters and their corresponding organizations for taking the time to be here with us today. Ayana Therapy, Tuesday's Children, Rooted, the Colorado Department of Public Health, and Workhaven are just a few of the many organizations represented here today. Without their unique histories and perspectives, this year's symposium would not be possible. It has never been more important for all of us to come together to learn and to support each other, whether through sharing knowledge, resources, and experience with others, or just being present. We need you and this community to thrive. As an organization, Vibrant Emotional Health aims to provide space for people to come together to conduct equitable and diverse work. This symposium, with its theme on increasing access and minimizing disparities in disaster behavioral health, is just one example of how we can help each other and therefore help exponentially more people. Now, I am pleased to introduce one of our symposium organizers and the Crisis Emotional Care Team's program director, Amy Carol Dominguez, to lead us into the symposium. Thank you all. Enjoy the next 2 days. Stay safe and well.
This is April Natural. I'm the Assistant Vice President here at Vibrant Emotional Health and overseeing this Crisis Emotional Care Team, working with Amy Dominguez and the 700-strong cadre that we have here at the Crisis Emotional Care Team. Thanks for joining us today at the symposium, and also thank you so much to our CEO, Kim Williams, who's an extraordinary leader and has moved the effort that we have been making and working throughout the country in all different types of disasters, as well as helping to move the field forward with promotion of evidence-based interventions and working in all different cultures and communities that have been affected in so many different ways. We have an extraordinary group of speakers for you here today, and hoping that you really get a chance to hear from some people who've been doing work in this field that has been just moving mountains in how we're able to support children, families, and communities. Our first speaker, let's see. We have a host. I don't know if Amy's still able to join us, so I'm going to move us forward. I don't see Amy on, so I'm going to move us to our first host. Let me introduce to you somebody I'm very proud to introduce, our program manager for Vibrant's National Crisis and Wellness Team, Alicia Sterling. Is an extraordinary staff here at Vibrant who has been helping to support all of those who work in the crisis and emotional field. And she's been developing different wellness activities for the Vibrant staff, as well as for the entire Lifeline network. And she's here today to introduce our first speaker. I just want to make sure that I'm not stepping into Amy if she's available to speak, so I don't see her. So I'm going to move us forward. Thanks, Alicia, for hosting for us today. So I'll turn it over to you to introduce our special keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, April. Thank you to the interpreter, and thank you again to Kim, our wonderful president and CEO of Vibrant Emotional Health. As April mentioned, my name is Alicia Sterling, and I'm the Program Manager of National Crisis and Wellness Services. And it is my honor to introduce to you today Eric Colley. Eric Cully is a mental health advocate and the founder and CEO of Ayana, a technology company that offers access to therapy by enabling virtual communication between marginalized communities and licensed therapists who share their cultural traits, identities, and experiences. Prior to Ayana, Eric served as founder and CEO of Les Desiens, a socially responsible fashion line created to educate underprivileged girls in West Africa through art. Eric has held senior positions in investment banking and private advisory at Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. Eric attended the UCLA Anderson School of Management. He was raised in his native country of Senegal and is fluent in French and English. He lives in Los Angeles. Well, Eric, you have a breadth of experiences and are doing great things at Ayana Therapy, and we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Coley, and I'm pleased to be here. Amy contacted me a little while ago and asked me to be a part of this. And Amy and I go back around 10 or 12 years. She's been an instrumental person in helping us launch a company that we did about 10 years ago. So it was in passion. And the goal was to help young girls in Africa get to school full time. I'm the founder and CEO of Ayana Therapy. And Ayana offers access to mental health services to minorities with an emphasis on intersectionality. What many people don't realize is that a slew of people from of color and from underserved communities, they don't have access to what some of us deem as basic services, right? And insurance can be a part of it. But what's also a big issue is the inability to be seen and heard by your counselor. Quite often, if you happen to be, again, a minority, you tend to be inclined to want someone who can, in quote, see you and literally see you and hear you, and also be able to understand your culture, be able to understand some of the nuances of your culture, some of the jokes that you've also had with your mom and cousins and family members at home. So what we chose to do is we chose to put together an app, and the app is called Ayana. What Ayana does, it found a way to link people of color, minorities, with therapists based on race, gender, ethnicity, and religion. We have an emphasis also in intersectionality, in that we want to focus on people who are a double or a triple minority, right? So if you happen to be African-American and queer, if you happen to be Asian and LGBTQ, that's where we do our best work. We launched a couple of years ago, right in the midst of the pandemic, and also around the George Floyd sad demise. And we were faced with, unsurprisingly so, a great demand, right? That came from corporations, that came from individuals. I myself received around 15,000 emails in the span of a couple of months when we went to press. And some of these emails were quite candid and quite vulnerable in saying things along the lines of, just a quick liner: thank you for seeing me. Thank you for being here. I've been looking for you. And what it does, it really galvanizes our troops, right, in wanting to be able to display integrity, display a sense of deep commitment to what the work is going to be about. We currently have 400 therapists on the platform. And the way it works is you go on the app, you go through a questionnaire. And the questionnaire, what it does, it asks you questions about your past, your background, yourself, but a lot more in tune with your culture. In general, when you go through an app to find a therapist, what happens is that you go through what we call a Eurocentric sounding questionnaire, right? It fails to capture cultural nuances. It fails to ask you the right questions. Wrong questions lead to wrong answers. And so what ends up happening? What ends up happening is that you end up being matched with an individual that is not able to really understand you quite well. And what we did is we were able to deconstruct that questionnaire, and we're able to infuse some culturally important items for it to work better. In tandem, on the back end, we're also able to attract and recruit a slew of therapists of color, ranging from, again, Asians therapy, Black, African Americans, of course, Latin, and we were able to do what I call colloquially, so within Ayana, a Benetton, if you will. It helped us be able to attract very interesting clients who had been seeking us out for a while, but hadn't been able to find someone like us. In launching a couple of years ago, we were also able to get the attention of major corporations that wanted to heal, if you will, their employee bases. And so some of them, sadly enough, were reactive to what we know took place, right? In lieu of being proactive. I can't really name names, of course, that wouldn't be, that'd be a faux pas, but we were able to detect a guilt-induced response, right? That led them to contact us and say, look, we'd love for you to help us out. Our people are hurting. And we've had to respond to that. We were approached by major cities, New York, East Coast, West Coast. And what we are not having to do is we are having to play a bit of catch up, right? When a major event takes place, generally so, over the last few years, January 6th, when a shooting takes place, we tend to be the subject of beaucoup attention. We want to be able to preempt that. We'd like to be able to preempt it in wanting to be able to be pre-installed, pre-available at school, in school systems, right? We'd like to also be able to be available in most provisions, to be able to be there, so you wouldn't have to go through such a terrible tragedy for us to be, for you to be able to find us. So where are we now? We currently have 400 therapists in the US, and we'd like to go global. Before we do that, I want us to be able to have been able to work with private systems in the prison board, right? We think that there's no way to really have a lasting impact, one that can last for generations, unless you go at the source, right? And my goal, my personal goal is to make sure that we can find a way to be aligned with states and cities and private prison systems to find a way to have Ayana be introduced to individuals who have had needed our product for a while, and listen and learn, right? Our success is going to be very much tied to cultural humility. Are you able to listen? Are you able to have an egoless conversation and let them drive the conversation? You are here to listen and learn and construct and formulate a product that's able to address the very needs of those individuals. And it's something that I know our industry lacks. There's a monumental, deeply embedded belief or system that is, one, quite westernized, which we need to de-westernize a bit, but also one that doesn't, I think, have its ear on the ground enough, right? The leader of the conversation should be the person that needs a product. And in making sure that we can be more humble and listen to them, I think it can lead us to having somewhat of a more successful impact in the US, and then go overseas as we grow. Forgive me, I wasn't able to share my screen, and I apologize for that. But I'm happy to open up the questions. And again, I apologize for the delay and the Wi-Fi issues. It's been a weird morning today. I'll close by saying maybe a couple of things, if I may. I got lucky personally when it came to Ayana. Its premise came from one of my best friends. Her name is Celeste. Celeste couldn't find a counselor. And I'm the friend that bugs you every day and says to you, hey, were you able to find one yet? And Celeste couldn't find one. And it was due to the scarcity of women of color, as she's one. And she had to, if you will, settle, right, in not being able to find the one that she wanted. Your very nuances, your very desires, your very quirks, if you will, are to be able to dictate who you want. No one should have to settle for the harvest. So in tandem, my own story also was able to also influence Ayana. I came from banking, that's my first career, and leaving it, I became quite depressed. And it really, really, really affected me quite deeply. The level of disruption that it caused, I'm not grateful for, right? To me, there's a beauty in what I call dancing with pain, right? If you immerse yourself with certain parts of pain, there are ways to be able to mold it and get out of that things that were uncovered in you. And so for me, the blessing was my friends' needs to get a therapist, along with my own story. I was able to, somewhat with a level of self-delusion, because I'm not a counselor, no, I'm an engineer, to blindly put together a product, and we keep it moving forward. And so now we are available in 42 states. I was able to recruit great team members. We currently have on our board the former chair of the LA County Mental Health Commission. I also have on our board Dr. Grills, who is the former president of the National Association of Black Therapists, and a slew of others, right? So I'm well surrounded. We are here to work. There's a lot to do. And I'm really looking forward to having Ayana be able to be deeply embedded in the culture. Last comment I'm going to say is that Ayana in Bengali means a mirror, right? And it's meant to evoke a sense of knowing your culture, knowing your experiences, right? And in a mirror that you're looking for, you're able to see your therapist better. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you so much, Eric, for your information and for your time and for sharing with us. And I've opened it up for attendees to ask any questions that they may have. So the first one that we have is, how do you spell the name of the app?
Sure, it's A as an apple, Y-A-N-A, A-Y-A-N-A. Therapy.
Perfect, thank you.
She was on the spot, Amy again.
Amy, the director of Crisis Emotional Care team, asked, can you share an example of a success story?
One of our clients is KIP, KIPP, right? One of our actually earliest clients. They helped us actually grow into who we are. And they are a great partner of ours. What I've noticed is that they are entities who have the foresight of knowing that scholastic and academic prowess, preempted by resources and support that they offer, can only be successful if it's matched with a sense of how are you doing here up above, right? And also here as well. What I've learned is, and this is even outside of KIP itself, but our earlier clients, there's a bit of a reticence in opening up because you've been so disappointed in the past and you don't want to give someone else a new chance at redressing some of your wounds. And we've had to learn to gently, and I call Ayana also the gentle shoulder. We hate to sound coercing. And so what I've learned is that there's a sense of hope and a sense of a bit of a dystopian belief where I want you to succeed in getting to know me, but please this time make it the right way. And so I've cried a lot at work. My team knows that I, once ago the month, I just happen to tear up. And that particular moment is because we had a client whose mother said that her son had never been able to open up to anyone virtually. And when he was able to do so to us, and of course, private information between him and his client, but what he was able to reveal is that he had yet to have seen such a transcendental voice that could emanate out of him that led him to where he was into becoming currently as we speak, a successful PhD student, right? He's someone that had dropped out of college and was literally lost for quite a while. And, for me to witness the fact that a simple product that, I thought of with the help of my friend and my own story was able to, could have a multiplier effect. So he, to me, was the voice, the ears of people that are behind him that I know I'm trying to get to. And he and I are still in touch, and he's someone that I know made this very difficult journey in launching a startup worth it. And so he's a bit of my North Star, right? I rely on him to make sure that we are good listeners, right? And so he's someone that I think we impacted the whole journey.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing about your inspiration and influence. And we have another question. Can you speak a little bit about the difference in understanding about what mental illness is in cultures such as your home country of Senegal and in other areas in West Africa where you have worked, as opposed to how we perceive mental illness here in the US?
Good question. There's an evident chasm, an evident difference between what I would say forward thinking in quotes vis-a-vis therapy in the West versus countries in West Africa. In the West, there's a more open, there's a high level of receptivity when it comes to therapy, which can even be, kind of broken down demographically within races and cultures. You have a bigger macro example of it overseas, where in West Africa, the level of receptivity is higher in, of course, cities, right? And by higher, I mean, not that high, but still higher than rural places in West Africa. I was quite lucky and fortunate. My mother was a pharmacist, and I grew up around therapists as a kid. So I was a bit more open to it than I think people around me might have had been. Senegal is on the water, so we also were able to benefit from a somewhat more open culture, if you will. But in general, responsiveness is quite low, right? There are other ways of healing, other ways of looking at wounds that are generally done through familial affairs, right? Church, mosque, right? Speaking to your neighbor. Those are great. They don't fully address what could be addressed. But those are rituals and traditions that have taken place a long time ago that need to be accompanied with therapy. And I find solace in that over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a slight increasing movement in terms of being open to therapy. And a lot of work has to be done, but things are getting better.
Yes, and you're part of that lots of work. And what are some things that we can continue to do to break down mental health stigma, to get folks aware of the benefits of mental health from your perspective in those cultures where it's difficult to get people to see the benefits?
Over communication, right? If it's possible, within familial centers and communities. Again, I think over the last 3, 4, 5 years in the BIPOC centers, you've seen that happen more than ever, right? For the first time in a long time. Churches have also been able to join the fray finally as well, where in being able to destigmatize what therapy is really about. Mosques as well. And so for me, it starts at home, right? Education is important. But if education is going to come from parties like us, like ours, there's got to be a very humble approach in doing so. You can only educate someone while making sure that there's a very non-condescending way of approaching a matter. If they don't know, they don't know, right? Humility has to be the bridge through which you are discussing those matters, and educate them. And naturally so, quite organically so, parents will then be able to share and discuss matters with their own loved ones. But I think where we lose some of them is there's a sense of you should do what I think is good for you. That's the way to go. There should be allow me to get to know you deeply enough and say, and I can construct a way for you to hear me well, right? And it's also a partnership, right? It's on you, it's on us.
Wonderful. Thank you, interpreter Cindy. I think we are returning to Kim. Hello, Kim. So I would also like to ask Eric, given that this is Pride Month, if you've seen an increase of wanting of support from your clients regarding Pride or regarding LGBTQIA+, any concerns within those communities, and what you're seeing and what that looks like at Ayana.
Sure. It is the case, right? And one could surmise as such when we celebrate a community every other month or so, you see a bit of a slight increase, either coming from the corporate world or individuals themselves. I want that to not be the case. I want it to be preemptive. This ought to be normal, right? I joke about this, not very PC, but that corporate America is now aware that BIPOC communities have feelings, have emotions, and it's like it shouldn't have taken George Floyd for us to be able to be in touch with you. Vis-a-vis the LGBTQ community, again, there's a slight increase that's happening over the last month or so. We try to do a good job of emphasizing education, right? Destigmatizing access to therapy through our social media channels. We try to also interview our therapists that happen to be from the same community as well. But it's not, it is unsurprising that it happens coinciding with the current celebration of the community at place, indeed.
Right, agreed. It should be quite normalized being able to reach out for concerns regarding LGBTQIA+, for support with people of color. You're right, it shouldn't take George Floyd or any other concern for people to feel comfortable reaching out. And we would hope that there's not a surplus at any time for any particular communities. And so given that we've had, sadly, a few recent massacres, one being in Buffalo at the grocery store, another being in Texas at the school, another being in California at a church, and a few others as well that are focused on people of color. A lot of people of color got hurt or died during those times. And we would like to know if there have been concerns about that at your organization, either from staff, because we know that sometimes staff have their own concerns regarding this, or from your clients and what that looked like.
Mm-hmm. When questions like this get asked, and there was a focus here on people of color, I cannot answer them without admitting that I'm quite privileged, right? I'm not African American. I've been here for 26 years, but I wasn't born and raised here. So I benefit from a layer of protection that keeps me different, that keeps me naive, right, to how deeply embedded things are and have been before I moved here. So I do a daily job of also learning, listening, adapting. And in all candor, and I don't say this much, but in the press when we were interviewed, part of why I learned Juliana is because my best friend Celeste, when I said, get you a therapist, she said, well, I want a Black woman. And I said, well, I don't have a Black man. And she was like, why? I said, well, what do you have a Black woman? She goes, because I got checked. And I realized that my privilege in not being born in the US gave me a chance to not have to talk about race within therapy. And so in answering your question, I want to be authentic and upfront and honest about this. Having said that, people are afraid, right? People are scared. The remnants of the climate around George Floyd are still felt, right? What's happened over the last couple of weeks all throughout the US is a reminder of how at peace can you be while being out in the streets of the US. We are looking at offering therapy for our therapists, right? We are looking at having our therapists form some kind of consortium and have specialists discuss these matters. Our clients, we have nonprofit clients, those issues are being, again, readdressed. Our employees, of course, are shaken a bit, right? And so we find ways to create safe spaces and discuss this quite openly. And in all candor, look, I mean, it's hard to guess that it's not going to happen again in the future. So what do you do about this? How do you teach coping ways, coping mechanisms for people to be able to deal with trauma, right? With grief and pain. And so we're putting together resources that sadly enough, sadly enough are following the current culture and not being able to be a friend of it, right? We are adapting to the culture, and the culture in this case means bloodshed, guns, and I don't have all the answers, and so my goal is to make sure that we spend resources and effort in recruiting more therapists that we know have expertise in this matter, and go out there, right, and preemptively go at entities that I know would be more affected by this than others.
Oh, that's great how fluid you are being, because that's what it takes. We don't know what's coming up these days, and being flexible and seeking more support as it comes up is wonderful. And another question is, what do you recommend regarding the balance between sharing your own lived experience and also protecting yourself and having protective boundaries when speaking to clients? So both for you personally, but for other clinicians as well.
So again, I'll say that I'm not a therapist myself, and I tend to be more open than most, I've learned, which I'm happy about. It took me a while to get there. It is critical to be able to find a balance, right? And it's a nuanced balance, right? People have their own. It takes patience. It takes a sense of hopefully having enough EQ to gauge emotional intelligence, to gauge what is appropriate to share and what's not. But I tend to be a bit risk-prone in that I'd rather almost overshare. Therapy, its success is based on authenticity. You cannot expect to go home having healed, having talked about the wound, if you haven't opened up. It's just a primordial fact when it comes to counseling. And though it's hard for people to, people all have their own boundaries, and they all know how to, I'm hoping, know what to divulge or not. Making a mistake in oversharing, to me, is almost worth it because of what you hope it can achieve. Now, of course, judgment here is at key as well, right? But I'm a big proponent of vulnerability, of authenticity, of being able to break down and get out of that a much more powerful exchange than you would otherwise have had.
Great, thank you. And as someone who isn't a therapist yourself, just thank you for providing such a wonderful organization. And we know that you have such a wonderful diverse background, from fashion to finances to educating girls in Africa. And how do all of these experiences come to support AANA and the work that you do?
My first career was in the corporate world, right? I call it the 401k world. And I've had the luck of having two more lives, one in fashion, where we help educate young girls. My first foray as an entrepreneur, and most recently, AANA. I'm going to get emotional. So I wish that people were given the gift of fighting for what they believe in here. For some is utopian, where there are circumstances, right, that that require you, that keep you from being able to see it, right, to see them. I feel so lucky and privileged to have learned some of the basic skills in finance management, in finance, in banking, in fashion. Again, I'm not a fashion person. I blindly jumped in, self-delusion again, which is one of my go-tos. But there's a sense of truth that I finally found in his career that came from the amalgamation of my past experiences, where I don't fear the way I used to. I call it dancing with fear, right? And it's a gift that I'm trying to exploit every day and share if I can. But people are so humiliating, not all of us, many of us wish we could and we can't at times. But to answer your question, I think for me, it comes down to a sense of fearless that I think I've achieved over time in making big mistakes. I mean, I've invested myself in public so many times. I call imposter syndrome my friend. She comes over, we have dinner and drinks. She tells me, look, your ego may have to be checked on the next call. Right? It's a sense of unlearning, deconstructing, deprogramming that's painful that I've been through, that's now been able to help me in being able to jump into waters that I know would have seemed so foreign and so hard for me to be a part of. And that's based on my having jumped into worlds that I didn't know much about. I don't recommend doing it, at every other year, but I felt like Ayana was in my heart. Fashion also, because the company Le Dessin was to give homage to my grandmother who went to college in the 1920s in Africa, my mother who also was educated. And so it was a way to, how do I recreate a world where young girls from Africa are able to normalize education? Long answer, I'm sorry, but it really dug deep into the stage of my journey and where I hope we can get to in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And, I know that sometimes as a Black person, we could have varying and different experiences than our white colleagues or colleagues of other races and other shades. And I would like to know if you have any thoughts or ideas for colleagues who are not of color and what they can do when clients come to them and would like advice or would like to speak through some concerns that maybe a Black clinician or another clinician of color may have more experience with.
Sure. So the very essence of what we do and stand for vis-a-vis even Ayana being a mirror is that when you fill out the questionnaire, which again, ones that used to exist were what I call very Eurocentric sounding, with ours, you are able to dictate and customize who you want to talk to, right? And so when we ask you about race, ethnicity, gender, orientation, and religion, when it comes to ethnicity, we have 8 ethnicities with 8 subs. So you could say, look, I'm not just Black, I'm Black Caribbean, right? Then we say to you, how important is it for you to have a counselor from the same region? Nuance answers, very important, not at all. So imagine being asked that about orientation, gender, and religion. At the end of the questionnaire, your profile can say the following. I want to have someone who's more Caribbean, less queer, but more Christian. So there's even a gradation of needs within what you're looking for. So your end product, i.e. who you end up being matched with, reflects who you are, reflects your values. You found the person that you've been seeking. So we don't get to encounter that as much. We do have web therapists who go through, as a lot of them do, a bit of a higher focus on BIPOC issues when they get interviewed, but Ayana's success and focus is on making sure that you are seeking and finding the person that you want to talk to. If it's a woman who happens to be Latina and queer, that's who you're going to match with at Ayana.
That's wonderful. That's a great segue into a question about intersectionalities, because there are just so many. It could be Black and queer, or white and heterosexual, or any mix. I can think of maybe 100 different pairs or more. So in that case, how do you go through that process of looking for someone, a clinician that can speak to those intersectionality needs of the client?
So we have generous. We've developed ways to recruit a slew of therapists from all backgrounds, right? So when I first launched this with my interns, we would, for instance, reach out to the Women Muslim Association of Therapists in the US and beg them to join the platform, right? We do so for trans and queer out of Oakland. We do so for the Chinese Women Association, beg them to join the platform. So at the end, we end up having a rather diverse group of people. And it is up to you as to how and who you want to be able to be matched with. The algorithm, what it does, it gathers information from you. That's what it does. And then it's able to then give you on the back end the very product of what your profile is about. And it makes things easier for us. Now, of course, it's a machine, right? And it doesn't have the sought after value of EQ. And so we sometimes have to be involved, but very rarely. Generally, if we've done a good job of being able to input information in the algorithm, it does a wonderful job.
All right. Well, thank you for answering all of these questions, Eric. It was so great speaking with you. And I will turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Eric. So good to hear from you today. And thank you, Alicia, for hosting and facilitating. I'm sure we'll be in touch shortly. Eric, thank you again. Just so grateful for you as always. Everybody, thank you so much for bearing with our earlier technical difficulties. It's never a dull moment when working with Zoom, I'm sure. But my name is Amy Dominguez. I have the honor of being the program director of the Crisis Emotional Care Team. And I just wanted to take just 2 minutes before we jump into our next panel to share a little bit about what it means to be a part of that team. We have a cadre of closing in on 800 volunteers across the continental US and territories of behavioral health specialists. And that really does run the gamut in terms of disciplines. So from a chaplain to a medical doctor specializing in psychiatry, we really do have quite a wonderful mix of individuals who have raised their hand to say, whenever a crisis hits, I'm ready to go and I want to support. And I just wanted to take a moment to invite anyone who is participating in this symposium to join us. We offer trainings like this, as well as the other types of trainings that you've heard mentioned. Whenever a crisis does arise, we try to equip you to be ready to prepare, whether you are actively deploying or you are just curious about how you can implement best practices into your own practice of taking care of the people that you care for on a daily basis. We also produce a really robust resource library that provides amazing articles and insights that are relevant to these situations occurring in our daily life every day. And, one of the things that I've wanted to do before passing this off to the next panel was to actually just take a moment, if we can, to do a breathing exercise. I think a lot of us, if you're like me, we've been going at a very high speed over the last few months. And it's just good to just take a second. We're just going to do a really simple box breathing exercise together, where we're inhale for 3 seconds and then exhale for 3. We'll do that a total of 3 times. Surprise, surprise. So if you just close your eyes and feel your feet on the floor, relax your shoulders, maybe roll them back, get into a position that is comfortable for you. You can also feel free to stand or sit on the floor or lay down. But on my count, let's inhale. 1, 2, 3, hold it, exhale, 1, 2, 3. Let's do that again. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold it for a second and exhale, 1, 2, 3. And now for a final time. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, and exhale, 1, 2, 3. I think it's important just to take these moments to pause and hold space for each other as we are learning a lot, taking in a lot of information in, and trying to find our own place of self-care in the midst of everything that is going on. We would love to have you be a part of our cadre. We'd be honored for you to be a part of it with us. We have posted a link in the chat where you can find out more information about what it means to be a part of our team. And with that, I'm going to pass this off to Dr. April Natural, who is the Vice President of National and Wellness Programs here at Vibrant Emotional Health, as well as the other types of trainings that you've heard mentioned. Whenever a crisis does arise, we try to equip you to be ready to prepare, whether you are actively deploying or you are just curious about how you can implement best practices into your own practice of taking care of the people that you care for on a daily basis. We also produce a really robust resource library that provides amazing articles and insights that are relevant to these situations occurring in our daily life every day. And, one of the things that I wanted to do before passing this off to the next panel was to actually just take a moment, if we can, to do a breathing exercise. I think a lot of us, if you're like me, we've been going at a very high speed over the last few months. And it's just good to just take a second. We're just going to do a really simple box breathing exercise together where we're inhale for 3 seconds and then exhale for 3. We'll do that a total of 3 times. Surprise, surprise. So if you just close your eyes and feel your feet on the floor, relax your shoulders, maybe roll them back, get into a position that is comfortable for you. You can also feel free to stand or sit on the floor or lay down. But on my count, let's inhale. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that again. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Hold it for a second and exhale. 1, 2, 3. And now for a final time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. And exhale. 1, 2, 3. I think it's important just to take these moments to pause and hold space for each other as we are learning a lot, taking in a lot of information in, and trying to find our own place of self-care in the midst of everything that is going on. We would love to have you be a part of our cadre. We'd be honored for you to be a part of it with us. We have posted a link in the chat where you can find out more information about what it means to be a part of our team. And with that, I'm going to pass this off to Dr. April Natural, who is the Vice President of National and Wellness Programs here at Vibrant Emotional Health.